Edwin E. Gordon was born in 1927. He played tuba and string bass in the Army Band before attending Eastman School of Music, where he earned his bachelor's and master's degree in string bass performance. In the years following, he played string bass in the Gene Krupa Band and would later, in 1958, earn a doctorate in music education at the University of Iowa. At the University of Iowa, Dr. Gordon taught early childhood through 12th grade. It was at this point that he became intrigued how humans learn when learning music. He stayed at the University of Iowa for 16 years investigating music learning processes and developing the musical aptitude profile in 1965, the Iowa Test of Music Literacy in 1971, and the psychology of music teaching. His culminating research was then used as the basis to create the music learning theory, or MLT, philosophy of music learning theory. Dr. Gordon believed that every person has musical aptitude, which is the possibility for musical achievement. And musical achievement is the realization of that possibility. He believed that the learning of music is the same as learning language, math, and science. Gordon believed musical aptitude, musical achievement, is affected by one's own level of audiation. In this case, audiation is one's own musical thinking. According to Gordon, the musical aptitude of a person fluctuates from the time of birth to around the age of 9 and will then stabilize. Gordon developed musical aptitude tests to help teachers gauge where a student is in their musical ability and helps the teacher to adapt any lesson for any individual student. Audiation within the student. Gordon theorized that just like language, children learn by listening to both older children and adults to nurture musical aptitude. Young children rely on adults and peers to guide their initial development of musical aptitude. This is usually considered informal learning experiences, as this happens usually between the age of 2 to 6, before teacher guidance occurs. Students start to develop from these activities and interactions the ability to imitate music, such as rhythm, chants, and songs, and start to adapt to different stimuli from music. Different types of audiation can be used by teachers to assess the student's musical abilities. In the next slide are the different types and stages of audiation that occur for a student from the age of 9 to 15. The types of audiation and stages of audiation help teachers to adapt lessons and to assess the student's musical knowledge. Musical learning sequences. Gordon believed that for optimal music learning to occur, it must include the following sequences: music skill learning sequence, tonal learning sequence, rhythm learning sequence, and pattern learning sequence. These sequences help students to determine what pattern the music is and tonally what the piece is in. Gordon believed that solfege is key to this in order to get students a tonal center and to understand how pieces can change over time. And here is a link to a lesson that applies the music learning theory.
The Orff Schoolwerk approach. The founder of Orff Schoolwerk was Karl Orff, who was a German composer most known for his musical and dramatic stage works based on ancient and classic texts, his most popular being the Carmina Burana. Orff Schoolwerk originated from the work of Karl Orff and a colleague of his, Dorothy Günther, who was a movement teacher. In 1924, they founded the Günther School in Munich. There, they created a place where musicians and dancers could express and be a part of each other's music. A 1948 recording of Günther School caught the eye of music educators, and they asked Karl Orff, along with colleague and former student Gunhild Kietmann, who was a former student of the Günther School and then stayed on staff afterwards. And they were asked to create the same kind of musical experience, but for children. They then both went to work in the field with children, and they were there to develop their ideas of elemental music. All that work leaded up to their publication of volumes 1 through 5 of Orff Schoolwerk between the years of 1950 and 1954. Philosophy. Orff Schoolwerk uses natural group behavior to awaken and begin development of the potential musicality that is inherent in all human beings. The Orff Schoolwerk method provides a framework that enables hands-on music learning by participants of all ages or experience levels. The task of the teacher is to set students up for success by designing and facilitating activities, as well as creating a joyful, meaningful experience. There is opportunity for individuals to show their strengths, but there is really a stronger focus on cooperative group efforts. Music and movement are to be elemental, meaning music is never alone, but always tied with movement, dance, and speech, which conveniently leads us to movement, speech, and singing. Orff Schoolwerk uses first movement, which creates spatial awareness and helps coordinate motion to keeping a steady beat. In the early ages, time is spent developing a vocabulary of stationary and locomotor movements. And this is usually done as a game to students, so it's almost like a trick. Speech is something that children do naturally in, say, children's play. Little rhymes and sayings like rock, paper, scissors are constantly being used. And Schoolwerk uses them because they are usually set in a rhythmic pattern, rock, paper, scissors, and with a steady beat. As a teacher, you can do a lot with this due to the fact that later these activities will be expanded on through the use of more complex rhythmic patterns, and just the fact that a well-chosen rhythmic pattern in the mother tongue really helps establish that feeling that is needed to create rhythm as a separate entity. Singing and children's groups usually go hand in hand. Just like rock, paper, scissors, there's always young people are always singing. And these games, singing and games, are usually tied together, and these games are really important for providing strength in singing and developing a sense of tonal relationships through the use of appropriate folk songs. It's usually starting with more basic melodies such as sol, mi, la, sol, mi, and then furthering that development very slowly by creating a pentatonic scale, and then that snowballs to a major scale, a minor scale, and eventually down the line it will be church modes. This progression also can change. It just really depends on the culture of your school and appropriate folk songs that you have to decide on. The ORF process. The term ORF process is used to describe the sequence that ORF teachers use when they write a lesson plan. And the first step would be exploration. This is where students discover the possibility from the material of the class. For example, make your own melody using so and mi. The next step is imitation. This is where you develop skills through echo. This could be the students repeating a movement that was first done by a teacher or a group leader. It could also be repeating a melody. The next step and third step is imitation. Imitation was improvisation. And that's making up new patterns or forms. This work is based off of exploration and the models learned from imitation. And the fourth step is creation. This is combining all of the previous steps into small poems. This step is where the students apply what they learned through the use of a performance tool. And that leads to the culmination of the ORF process. And finally, we have an ORF lesson. This is a link to Julia Scott demonstrating the ORF process using a tune called Simple Gifts. If you go through this video, you can point out each step of the ORF process and you can see how a lesson is done from an ORF teacher. The sequence of events is very important, and it's clarified at the end when Julia Scott points out each step of explore, imitate, improvise, and create. Once each step is complete, they then perform what they created to make sure that there's complete understanding of the material, which is also very important in the assessment of an ORF teacher. And that's it.
Today we are going to be talking about Zoltan Kodály. Born in 1882, he is a well-known Hungarian composer, musician, teacher, and ethnomusicologist. He is most well known for his desire to teach Hungarians, as well as his dedication to collecting folk songs with his partner, Béla Bartók. He then incorporated many of these folk songs into children's choruses, as well as requiring his students to write children's choruses to increase their music literacy. The point of these choruses was to advance music literacy, like I just mentioned, but throughout Hungary, not just with his students, and that was one of his primary drives throughout life. So, Kodály's philosophy stems from the idea that music plays an important role in a child's intellectual, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual development. One of the main pillars of the Kodály philosophy system is that music belongs to everyone. Education in music is something that everybody should have a right to, and it's also something that cannot be left to chance. Kodály believed that music was intended to be used to develop every aspect of a human. This is shown in his quote that says, "Music is a spiritual food for everybody. So I studied how to make more people accessible to good music. Zoltan Kodály sequenced his instruction from starting with sound and moving to sight. So they would oftentimes sing and hear things first. They would listen and then it would be written out rather than starting out by learning this is how you read notes. Then they would go from what they know and move to stuff that they don't know so that it may become known. They would move from simple and combine those simple things to make ideas and concepts more complex. And he would go from concrete facts and ideas to more conceptual and abstract ideas rather than the hard facts. Now he ordered his instruction from hearing, so you listen first, then it would be singing, so then you would sing what you heard, then it would be shown, then the students or people across Hungary would verbalize it, so they would speak it. He used a system of tas and titis for eighth notes, so for quarter notes would be ta, 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 and titis would be the eighth notes verbalized as t, 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 t. So people would be learning rhythms and stuff like that and verbalizing it without having it written out. They'd be able to hear the different rhythms, but then they would start deriving from that and taking what they could hear and verbalize and putting it towards writing so they could write it out, towards reading music, and then towards creating. And this reminds me of Bloom's taxonomy, where it moves from the lower order thinking skills, which would just have been the hearing and singing, and it moves towards the creating aspect. Kodály's lesson process is a 5-step process based on this quote that says, "Thorough knowledge of material must precede everything, for anything else can be built only upon that knowledge. Any efforts to achieve aesthetic results which either precede or discard knowledge are equivalent to building castles in Spain." So essentially this quote is saying that you have to have a foundation on which you're basing everything. So there are 5 different phases that he leads the students through. The first phase would be the preparation phase. Students experience the new concept and learn mainly through listening, moving, singing by ear through this phase, and assessment is also built in it, that the teacher then would use a group singing and oral analysis to give the students the ability to identify where the new element is in that, and to demonstrate the important attributes, I guess you could say. The next phase would be the phase where they make it conscious, or they can name the element, revisit it in the oral context, and visually represent what that would be. Whether that's through writing or drawing, it would be a visual representation. And the next phase would be reinforcement, which is the students continue to write and read that pattern the information that used to be new is becoming more set, and they explore through listening and singing and moving, just like you did in the first phase, more the new element, but you start to put it into different contexts rather than just the initial setting. Then there's the practice phase, which is students continue to explore the new element, which is really no longer new to them, in both familiar patterns but also unfamiliar patterns, which can be found in like various songs or exercises, reading pieces, listening examples, and all of these things are now, they're searching for the concept within them. The final stage or phase would be the creation phase. Just like in Bloom's taxonomy, where the highest level of thinking is where they're creating, they take what they have learned and they have climbed up this visual ladder here, and they have gotten to the top, and this creation is based on accumulation of all of their knowledge, so they engage in this improvisation, this creation and composition, and performance even is definitely a creation phase, and it in that they demonstrate mastery of the musical element or concept that they were learning. And then finally, there's this Kodály lesson example where Sandy Matthias takes you through a example of a Kodály structured lesson, and it's really excellent. She takes you through a couple songs like Ba Ba Black Sheep, or Bow Wow Wow. Sorry, not Ba Ba Black Sheep. It was, I don't remember, but it was definitely Bow Wow Wow, and a couple other children's rhymes that oftentimes are well known. And then she structured it where they were hearing her singing it, and they sang it, and then they were identifying the rhythms using tas and TTs, and then they were dancing in motion to it. So they layered these things so that the students in this case would have had a greater understanding of that concept.
Today we will be talking about the Del Cruz approach to teaching music and K5 and general music. Del Cruz was born into a musical family. His mother was a teacher and a pianist. Her teaching style was very unique, but it was favored, or her teaching style, she favored the philosophy of Pestalozzi. I hope I said that correct. This style of teaching is all about through the senses and experience, which is the foundation of the Del Cruz approach. So his teaching style all stems back down to his beginnings, his upbringings. Just a little bit about his life. When he was very, very young, in 1875, he enrolled in the Geneva Conservatory for Music. When he was 18 years old, he transferred over to the Paris Conservatory in 1884. He studied art and music because he didn't know what to do with his life. He had no future for himself. In 1892, he actually went back to the Geneva Conservatory and became professor of solfege. As professor of solfege, he found out that his students couldn't feel the nuances of music. They couldn't internalize and feel. Yes, he taught great musicians and people who can play instruments well or sing well, but they couldn't experience music. So he ended up going from a lecture type of teaching to a very hands-on approach, which actually caused a lot of backlash from the conservatory and Geneva itself. But luckily for him, in Berlin, his approach took a very strong foundation. And after World War I, his approach started becoming established around the world. A little bit about his, or going away from his biography and going more towards the actual philosophy of his teaching style. He strove in his teaching that every musician should be sensitive and expressive through movement, thought, feeling, creativity, sound, etc. And he wanted to create a teaching style that used the senses and intellect into one single experience. He wanted active involvement in musical expression. He says that music moves and it has time and rhythm, and so should the musicians move too. Musicians shouldn't just sit there and create music. Music is a human experience that should always be something that the musician is involved while creating music. If you look at like the very top picture on this slide, this approach favors less talking and more doing, less instruction time and more experience. If you see the pictures on the slide, the kids, they're moving, they're rolling on the ground, they're tossing cloth in the air, they're playing with hula hoops. There's an actual movement to what they are doing. There's involvement. They're not just sitting there and learning music or clapping a rhythm. They're involved, and it's very kinesthetic. Now going into the components of this teaching style, there are three main components to the Del Cruz approach. The first one, is rhythmic solfege. The next one is improvisation, and the last one is eurythmics itself. Eurythmics, people consider to be the Del Cruz approach, but it's only one component, and it's actually the last component that he created. Now to talk a little bit about the three, rhythmic solfege teaches sophisticated learning. It develops the inner ear. This is the act of phonating and audiating while learning rhythm also. That's why it's called rhythmic solfege. The Del Cruz, he favored a fixed do approach, which is very, very European. The Del Cruz approach is very popular in France, and they like the fixed do approach. Where you see in America, it's a lot of movable do with some mixed do or fixed do. But culture context, I guess. Going into improv, when Americans think of improv, we automatically think of jazz music. Picking up a saxophone and just pulling out a melody out of thin air. Yes, that is improv, but this isn't the type of improv that is meant in this style of teaching. It's improv with movement, verbal, spontaneity. It's hearing something and responding to it. If it's responding something on a piano or hearing something on the piano and responding to it through jumping or running or dancing or audiating and phonating somehow, as if it's just animal sounds or yelling or laughing. It's literally just hearing something and reacting to it. And that's a very, very important aspect of this approach. The last part, eurythmics, this is the actual act of experiencing rhythm and proportion and symmetry. It's the act of moving and the act of experiencing the movement. A lot of people think with the Del Cruz approach, it's only the eurythmics part, but what they don't understand is that all three are completely necessary to fully teach through the Del Cruz style. All three of them is a puzzle piece to the main puzzle. You can't have just a rhythmic solfege and movement, or you can't just have movement and improv. You need all three. All three are necessary, and one is not more important than the other. Eurythmics is not more important than solfege, but solfege is not more important than improv, and improv isn't more important than movement. And all are taught at the same time and together, and that's what makes this approach very unique. the next part is actual Del Cruz sequencing. Excuse me. This is the sequencing of lessons, or the lesson process, whatever you want to call it. So lesson 1 is all about hearing to moving, and then it's moving to feeling, and then it's feeling to sensing. And as you can probably get the grasp, one builds up to the other. The beginning stages of learning would probably take place between hearing to moving through probably sensing and analyzing. Intermediate is around the analyzing to reading portion, and the advanced level is incorporating all of these approaches together. This approach is very, it builds on to each other, because you can't have hearing and moving come before improvising to performing. And not all of these levels are going to be taught at the same time. It's all cumulative. To explain this slide better, it brings me to the next slide, which is the lessons and curricular organization. This is really broken. This shows the beginning level, intermediate level, advanced level of learning through the Del Cruz approach. The first level is, the beginning level, is total mental and kinetic awareness. This is really just hearing and reacting physically to a musical stimuli. It is to produce awareness and sensation to music that a child is hearing. It's hearing and responding to pulse, beat, subdivision, meter, rhythm, phrase, form, whatever the lesson is for that class. It's literally just putting on a recording or something and having the kids just respond to it in one way or another. Kind of like the first picture, or the only picture that's on the slide at the moment. This kid is touching a hot stove and he's reacting to it. If it's hot and you touch it, it's gonna hurt, and the body automatically responds. That's what the beginning level of the Del Cruz teaches. The intermediate level is all about creativity throughout the entire lesson. Like what I said the last slide, it's all cumulative. So it's playing something and it's responding to it. But it's more of a creative way of responding. It's teaching the children to be creative through the movements that they're creating to the stimuli that they hear. In this level, the intermediate level, there's a lot of small group interaction, very non-verbal, non-group interaction, I should say. This is very much like the reflection exercise that we did in our K5 class at Vandercook. It's mirroring the person in front of us. It's responding and creating movement to what you're hearing in a small group sense. But also non-verbal is very, very important, because you're supposed to be experiencing the music, not breaking it down and analyzing it, if that makes sense at all. The advanced level is called Plastique Anime. I hope I said that correct also. This is really using visual analysis of music, using the body. Very much like, you can say, synchronized swimming. It's the audience hears the music, and the swimmers are putting a picture to it, showing it. This level is all about expressing music through individual or group movement. It is spontaneously creating interactive composition of the music that's being heard. This is taking the sequencing of the last slide really into its depth. You cannot perform the Plastique Anime without being able to hear and move to the music. It's not being able to move without feeling and sensing, putting emotion into the spontaneity of the movement for a specific reason. Just in conclusion of this approach is very, very hands-on. It's very non-traditional lecture. Like, if I imagine, and if you also look up like YouTube videos of the Del Cruz approach, an administrator walking into the classroom and seeing this lesson going on, the administrator would probably think a lot of kids are just rolling on the ground, while the teacher is just simply playing a recording or playing the piano. But rolling on the ground in response to the music is the whole purpose of the Del Cruz approach. It is responding to the music stimuli, and it's through very purposeful lessons that the teacher teaches a very hands-on approach of experiencing music and having emotions to music that you wouldn't necessarily develop in any other type of classroom environment, which what I think is the very beautiful, I guess, about the Del Cruz approach. My personal opinion on the Del Cruz approach, I really like it to a degree. It is experiencing music. Music is the only thing that is cross-cultural, cross-species, if anything. Every animal has music, and every animal responds to music in one way or another. This is taking music down to a human interaction, to an animalistic experience. And also, like, through teaching, or through these exercises and lessons, the student's able to learn about the theory of music, I guess. The only downfall that I see with the Del Cruz approach is I'm a very linear type of person, I guess. I'd probably have to experience this approach to actually fully understand it, but how can you teach like notation, I guess, through this approach if it's all hands-on? I know that you can because I've seen YouTube videos on it, but it's very, very non-structured in an administration sense, I guess. But that's also what makes this approach so wonderful and why it still works and why people use it. So I guess just to conclude, thank you for watching. This has been the Del Cruz approach. Thank you.